Imagine if you combined Kerbal Space Program with Astroneer and then built the whole thing in Minecraft. This is Space Engineers. The first thing this game tells you in the description, well, actually the very first thing it tells you is if you buy this, you get both the PS4 and PS5 version. The very next thing it tells you, however, is that this game is in a beta state. They tell you immediately that you may experience performance issues, which vary depending on the console you're using. Sorry, game's not finished yet. More games these days should launch with this warning. Also, be aware this game varies from platform to platform in other ways. The PC and next-gen consoles are roughly the same, apart from a reduced multiplayer count. Last-gen consoles also have reduced PCU. That's how much stuff can be in a single world. Basically, you can cram less into it. Also, the programmable block cannot have scripts loaded into it. That's because console manufacturers don't support third-party code on their consoles. The game's fully compatible with a keyboard and mouse if you have them. There are tutorials, but they all open up in a separate web browser. Honestly, you're probably better off just scouring the internet. Something else you need to be aware of. Prior to me recording this particular run, I'd spent about 40-50 hours with the game already, and most of that was struggling because this is a very, very complicated game. It's got such a high bar for entry. There's lots of little things you need to know about, and you can come to a complete standstill inside of the first hour very easily. In fact, I did. Not everybody is going to have the patience to stick with this to discover everything it actually has. Okay, so now the public service announcements are out of the way, let's get into this. There's a few different game modes. There's a story, sort of, a very basic tutorial that doesn't really tell you anything. There's survival and create mode. There's support on consoles for the Mod.io store, whatever that is. I'm assuming PC users are more familiar with that than I am. There's also the ability to set up custom games, so there's quite a few ways to play this. As I've already said, this game is complicated. It's not just a capital C, it's every single letter of the word complicated in capitals. And which flavour of that complexity hits you first depends upon which game mode you start with. If you choose survival mode, like I did, you'll immediately be confused by where you get resources. It's a wide open field! What, am I supposed to grow corn or something? No, you take out the hand drill and start digging. will be doing a lot of this. Okay, I grabbed the stone. Now what? Now, remember that pod I sort of crashed in? It's got a survival kit on the back. Shove the stone inside. Except that's not enough. You've got to tell it to turn the stone into gravel. As a byproduct, it also generates iron, nickel, and silicon. Stone gets turned into gravel, iron, nickel, silicon. That's 4 things! This is just the bloody start! What can I do with those materials, you ask? Well, so much. Too much! There's a whole raft of radial menus. Each radial menu has several segments, and each segment has even more crap jammed into it. Good luck trying to find something useful if you don't know what you're doing. What you really need to do is start with a wind turbine to generate power for everything else. Build a wind turbine. I guarantee you it will do fuck all. You see, the wind turbine has to be at least 8 to 10 tiles off the ground to catch the wind. As if that isn't obscure enough, you also have to make sure each wind turbine is at least 10 tiles away from one another. Otherwise they interfere with each other. I get it, okay? NASA tech, 60 years in the future, I get that. But seriously, how was I supposed to guess this? I mean, this is the very first thing you have to do. You need power. And solar power is just a pain in the arse to start with. Wind is much easier to access, except that it's not. Unless you know the trick. It feels to me like the game deliberately tries to trip the new players up straight away. Because there's no wind speed indicator, there's no wind vanes. Hell, the trees, bushes and grass don't even sway in the wind. To give you a clue. Really? Right at the start? I need to build a tower of some sort, which means building it out of blocks. Specifically, light armor blocks. That's your best basis for building most things. Now, light armor blocks take 25 steel plates to make. And each plate takes 7 iron ingots. So that's 175 ingots per block. Fortunately, you have to place a frame of something before using the welding tool to add the rest of the ingredients, and a frame only takes 1 item to place. So just place a bunch of frames for your tower. It's cheaper. Now for the turbine itself. Have you seen the laundry list of shit you need for this? It's ridiculous. Oh god. More stone needed. So, once you've sorted the turbine, your next job is to build some better facilities. The survival kit's only going to get you so far. Again, though, this is something the game forgets to mention that you need. You need a refinery and an assembler. The refinery turns raw ore into ingots. The assembler takes the ingots and turns them into components. Your welding tool then turns components into facilities. And yes, those new facilities need even more materials to make. Have I put you off this game yet? You're still watching the video at least. Now, truth be told, the construction system here isn't actually much more complicated than other comparable games. But because it involves so many materials and so many components, it makes it look worse than it actually is. Now, if instead you choose to start the game in creative mode, the first problem you encounter instead is the controls. Press L3 to bring up the build menu. Use the shoulder buttons to switch pages. Use the thumbstick to select a group. Press X to cycle which item you have selected in that group. Unless unless you're outside the build menu, in which case press up to cycle items, press L2 to clear the item from your hand, unless you're in create mode, in which case L2 deletes placed items and L1 and circle clears the item instead. That's just the fucking build system! There's a huge array of menus and shortcut commands, and can I just say, it is actually quite impressive how they managed to get so many keyboard commands onto a PS5 controller. But yeah, holy fuck, there's a lot. Now, having played quite a lot of this game already, I would say it's probably best played, at least at first, from the custom game menu. That lets you choose from a wide range of start points and whether you use survival or create modes, along with a bunch of other custom features. But regardless of which game mode you choose, there's a bunch of other little things you need to know, such as you need an ore detector to find ore buried underground, or you can just fly across the landscape with a hand drill equipped that has a detector built into it. Just watch out for the trees. Don't look for uranium or platinum on a planet, those are only available in asteroids in space. Engines only thrust in the direction they point in, so to fly a cube-based ship in any direction, you need a minimum of 6 thrusters. 1 forwards, 1 backwards, 1 left, 1 right, 1 up, 1 down. You also need a gyroscope to be able to turn the ship in the air. You can use conveyors to link facilities, allowing items to travel between them automatically. But not everything can travel down these small conveyors. Large items won't go through them. Objects you build together are called grids. There are 2 sizes of grid, large and small. Everything needs power. Even if it's not doing anything, it still needs a trickle. Power flows through any block that's actually connected to its fellows, and that includes frames of blocks. The screen tells you how much hydrogen fuel your current vehicle has left, but the power gauge only tells you how much electricity of your current output you are using, not how much power you actually have left. The only way to recharge a battery is to connect it directly to a power generator or vice versa. That's easier said than done. In the past, you had to fuck around with rotors to get small grids to connect to large grids. Thankfully, nowadays, you can just attach a connector to both sides and it's plug and play. Assuming you can get the 2 of them to line up with one another, of course. Using the grinder to break things down returns the ingredients to your inventory, except batteries. Batteries require power cells, and power cells are never refunded. Be mindful when placing batteries. It may not be obvious, but I quite like this game. I do. It's got such a high bar. It's so hard to get into. I like how everything snaps to a grid. No pissing around getting everything millimetre perfect, because I bloody would given half the chance. I like the conveyor. I love the conveyors, providing a simple way of creating automated systems, such as using a mining ship to extract minerals, docking with the main ship, flying back to base, and having the refinery just automatically pull and process the minerals without your intervention. I like the inventory filters. Both the right and left-hand sides can be altered to show different storage areas on your current grid. It makes transferring items around way easier and quicker than trying to use your personal inventory as a go-between. I like the dampeners. They automatically try to keep your vehicle stationary, which is great if you've built a VTOL. It stops it from crashing. And if you're flying out in space, shut it off with a couple of button presses and just coast to your destination at high speed without burning fuel. Honestly, I could go on for hours about this game, but I'm trying to keep my video a respectable length. This game is not a respectable length. In survival mode, it took me many hours just to learn the basics, fumbling around not knowing what anything did. And even now, knowing how to do things, it takes me about an hour to set up a simple base, wind turbine, refinery and assembler. That's assuming, of course, your drop pod lands somewhere reasonable. Unlike this. Or this. Or this. Or here. Lots and lots of minerals and not a single trace of iron. Iron is the most used mineral in the game. I was flying around for an hour and found jack shit. Where is it? When I made it to space, I mean in survival mode, I properly made it into space, I was nervous. Turned out I needn't have been. Oxygen is no longer freely available, of course, but hydrogen fuel for your jetpack lasts way longer because it's not constantly having to fight gravity off. And you can build in any direction. No longer does your creation have to be built from the floor upwards like it does planet-side. I did mention this game was complicated, right? I'm pretty sure I mentioned it was complicated. I'm going to say it again, it's complicated. You can do some crazy awesome things in this game. Or stare in envy and disbelief at the creations other people have come up with, of course. The game's complexity works both for it and against it. It allows the construction of some awesome stuff, but it also presents a high bar for entry. You have to spend a significant number of hours with it just to get used to the basic controls and the systems. Not everyone is going to have the patience, which is a shame, because it's a damn good game. Once you've surmounted the Olympus Mons of working out what's what, it starts to come naturally to you. You start doing crazy stuff, and that's without the advantage of the programming block. You can build practical things, or random bullshit. It's up to you. There is some pre-built stuff as well. Gives you an idea of not only what to do, but maybe how to do it. And despite it being a beta and being allegedly a bit unstable, I only had it crash once in over 100 hours. And just to add a large cherry to the top of this, the game is only 14 quid. Seriously, 14 quid for this? And while there is quite a bit of DLC, it's all cosmetic stuff. You don't need it. And it's broken into bite-sized pieces at just over 3 quid each, making it very easy to pick out the bits you want. I do strongly recommend you read the wiki site first. See if it sounds like the kind of thing you might be interested in, then consider buying it. And at 14 quid, it's not a catastrophe if you suddenly discover you don't like it. Complicated, I'll say it one more time just for the good of my own sanity. It's complicated is this game. Make no bones about it, it's hard to get into. I can't stress that enough. God knows I've tried in this video. But it is a superb game. I love it to bits, which is the main reason I've spent over 100 hours with it. Quite a bit of that time, as I've said, I've had to spend with it to get used to its systems. And there's no end of advice online on how to do things. Just watch out for that one bit of advice which tells you that you need a rotor to connect a small grid to a large grid, because that bit of advice, that's out of date. You can just plug and play the connectors these days. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do. Takes a while to work it all out, like how I flew my spaceship into space at one point, because that's something you've got to do at some point, and it was uncontrollable. It was uncontrollable. It's because you're supposed to put more than one gyroscope on very large ships. I'd only put one on it, so it was just God, just impossible. And there's things like solar panels only gather the most amount of power if they're pointing directly at the sun. So then the question becomes, how do I point it directly at the sun? And you've got to do things with custom turret controllers and hinges and rotors. And then you start thinking to yourself, okay, if I fit solar panels to my ship or space station, how do I point it at the sun? And oh God, then there's the thing with solar panels and gyroscopes. Complicated. Can't say you haven't been warned. Okay, I'm going to stop this video before it becomes 5 hours long, which will be so easy. What did you think of it? Leave a like or dislike down below. Have you played Space Engineers? Do you think it's awesome? Or did you think, holy shit, never in a million years? Leave a comment down below. For those of you who can't get enough of my dulcet tones, you can always subscribe, ring the bell for notification, because that's a separate thing. Or if you want to inflict my irritating persona on someone else, you can share instead. See you next time.